Imagine a world where the most powerful nation on earth systematically undermines democracy, supports brutal dictatorships, and exploits vulnerable populations for its own gain. Now, open your eyes. This isn't some dystopian fiction. It's the reality of American foreign policy, according to one of the world's most renowned intellectuals, Noam Chomsky. For decades, Chomsky has been a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy. Shining a light on the dark underbelly of American imperialism, his scathing analysis reveals a pattern of behavior that has led to societal collapse, increased inequality, and ongoing humanitarian crises across the globe. From Haiti to the Middle East and throughout Latin America, the fingerprints of American intervention can be found on some of the world's most pressing problems. Let's start with Haiti, a nation that has long been in the crosshairs of U.S. foreign policy. Chomsky argues that America's involvement in Haiti is a textbook example of how supposed aid has actually perpetuate poverty and instability. For over a century, the United States has meddled in Haitian affairs, propping up brutal dictatorships when it suited their interests and implementing economic policies that have devastated the local economy. The story begins in the early 20th century when the U.S. occupied Haiti under the guise of promoting stability. In reality, this occupation served to protect American business interests and establish a puppet government that would be compliant with U.S. demands. Fast forward to the 1990s, we see the U.S. playing a similar game. They supported the overthrow of Haiti's first democratically elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, only to later restore him to power under conditions that effectively neutered his ability to implement meaningful reforms. But Haiti is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Chomsky points out that the United States has a long history of crafting misleading narratives to justify its foreign interventions. Take, for example, the Spanish Civil War. While publicly claiming neutrality, the U.S. government tacitly supported Francisco Franco's fascist regime, prioritizing stability and business interests over democracy and human rights. This pattern of behavior isn't limited to the distant past. In the aftermath of World War II, there was a brief moment of idealism, talk of a new world order based on democracy and human rights. However, Chomsky argues that this idealism quickly gave way to a more cynical approach to foreign policy. The United States began systematically dismantling democratic movements around the world, particularly those that threatened American economic interests. In Latin America, this meant supporting right-wing dictatorships that were friendly to U.S. business interests, even if they were brutally oppressive to their own people. In Iran, it meant orchestrating a coup to overthrow a democratically elected government that dared to nationalize its oil industry. Time and again, the United States chose to prioritize the interests of foreign investors over the well-being and self-determination of local populations. As we entered the neoliberal era of the late 20th century, Chomsky argues that this approach to foreign policy became even more entrenched. The focus shifted from outright military intervention to more subtle forms of economic coercion. International financial institutions like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund became tools for imposing market-oriented reforms on developing countries, often with devastating consequences for local populations. This neoliberal turn marked a new phase in what Chomsky describes as an ongoing class conflict. The wealthy elites, both in the United States and abroad, have used their influence to shape policies that concentrate wealth and power in their hands, while leaving the majority of the population struggling to make ends meet. The result has been a dramatic increase in inequality, both within countries and between the global North and South.
No.
The consequences of these policies are stark and far-reaching. In Haiti, decades of US-backed neoliberal reforms have left the country unable to feed itself, dependent on imported food and vulnerable to price shocks. In the Middle East, US support for authoritarian regimes has fueled resentment and instability, creating fertile ground for extremist groups. And in Latin America, the legacy of US intervention continues to shape political and economic realities, with many countries still grappling with the aftermath of US-backed dictatorships and economic policies.
No.
Chomsky's critique extends beyond specific policy decisions to the very foundations of American foreign policy. He argues that the United States has consistently acted as an imperial power, using its military and economic might to shape the world in its own image. This approach, he contends, is not only morally bankrupt, but also ultimately self-defeating, as it breeds resentment and instability that eventually come back to haunt the United States. The collapse of the American empire, in Chomsky's view, is not just a possibility, but an inevitability. The contradictions inherent in U.S. foreign policy, claiming to support democracy while undermining it, preaching free markets while practicing protectionism, are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. As other powers rise and the world becomes more multipolar, the ability of the United States to impose its will on others is waning. But what comes next? Chomsky is not optimistic about the prospects for a peaceful transition to a more equitable world order. He warns that as the American empire declines, there is a real danger that it will lash out, potentially leading to catastrophic conflicts. The only hope, he suggests, lies in grassroots movements that can challenge the dominant narratives and push for a fundamental reorientation of U.S. foreign policy. This brings us back to the importance of understanding and critically examining the history of American foreign policy, by exposing the gap between rhetoric and reality. Between stated ideals and actual practices, Chomsky hopes to empower people to demand change. He argues that only by confronting the dark chapters of our past can we hope to create a more just and sustainable future. As we grapple with the implications of Chomsky's analysis, it's clear that the stakes could not be higher. The choices we make today about how to engage with the world will shape the future of not just the United States, but the entire planet. Will we continue down the path of imperialism and exploitation, or can we chart a new course based on genuine cooperation and respect for human rights? The answer to that question remains to be seen. One thing is certain: thanks to thinkers like Noam Chomsky, we can no longer claim ignorance about the true nature of American foreign policy. The challenge now is to take that knowledge and use it to build a better world, one that lives up to the ideals we claim to hold dear.